Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to show you each game in review of week 1. So without further ado, let's waste no more time, starting with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. The Buccaneers defeated the Cowboys 31-29. As you can see, the Buccaneers are still Super Bowl contenders. Tom Brady still looks good as ever. 32 completions to 50 attempts, 379 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Antonio Brown looking like his 2014 self with 5 receptions, 121 yards, and 1 touchdown. Chris Godwin's turning to look like a top 10 wide receiver with 9 receptions, 105 yards, and 1 touchdown. Gronkowski still look like his prime self, 8 receptions, 90 yards for 2 touchdowns. And look at his defense. Shaquille Barrett's recorded the only sack for the Buccaneers, and we also got Carlton Davis, who got an interception last week. And looking at the Cowboys, Dak Prescott looked really great. 42 completions to 58 attempts, 403 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Ezekiel Elliott looking like he's not his old self anymore. 11 carries for 33 yards. In fact, the Cowboys had 18 carries for 60 yards. I would say that I could excuse that. That could be excused, but looking at it, I think Mike McCarthy is not using Elliott at all. The Buccaneers only ran the ball 14 times, and they got 52 yards for 3.3 carries average. But their wide receiver, Amari Cooper, 13 receptions, 139 yards for 2 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb, 7 receptions, 140 yards for 1 touchdown. CeeDee Lamb's looking like he's going to prove to be the top wide receiver outside of Justin Jefferson. And looking at this defense, they really did well. The best one I could talk about is Anthony Brown and Javon Curse. Micah Parsons did have a QB hit, but that's the best I can say about this defense. Looking at this, I still think the Buccaneers are still Super Bowl contenders like they were last year. Now for our next game, the Eagles and the Falcons. This was Jalen Hurts' breakout game. Looking at it, he did extremely well. He could be the next Lamar Jackson if he keeps this up consistently, like 27 completions, 35 attempts, 264 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He also had 7 carries for 62 yards. Miles Sanders, 15 carries for 74 yards. And Devontae Smith, he had a really great game with 6 receptions, 71 yards, and a touchdown. Jalen Reagor looks like he's going to shut off that wrong wide receiver label with 6 receptions, 49 yards, and a touchdown. And look at this defense. Javon Hargrave did really great this game with 2 sacks. And looking at the Falcons, Kyle Pitts only had 4 receptions for 31 yards, which is not the best tight end stats. Matt Ryan was 21 for 35 for 164 yards. Looked like he's about to fall off. Calvin Ridley, 5 receptions for 51 yards. And looking at his defense, Deion Jones had 11 tackles. And Jacoby. That's really not that much to say about the Falcons. If Jalen Hurts can keep up this performance, I believe he can be like a top 10 quarterback in the league and probably a new Lamar Jackson in the league besides Lamar Jackson. And looking at our next game, the Steelers and the Bills. The Steelers are proving that everyone who said that Mike Tomlin should have been fired are proving him wrong. Ben Roethlisberger had 18 completions for 32 yards for 188 yards and a touchdown. Deontay Johnson, he had a touchdown that game. And the defense is still looking good. Minka Fitzpatrick and Devin Bush are still there. Cameron Hayward, TJ Watt. There's TJ Watt proving he's worth that money. Looking at the Bills, Josh Allen was 30 for 51 for 270 yards and a touchdown. They still need to run the ball with Devin Singletary. He had 72 yards for 11 carries. Stephon Diggs with 9 receptions for 69 yards. And this defense, Jordan Pryor did have a sack. So did Mario Anderson. But seeing that, if the Steelers can keep this up and their defense can keep on clicking, maybe they can still become Super Bowl contenders. And the Bills, I don't know what to say about them. And the Bengals, our next game is the Vikings and the Bengals. Kirk Cousins has 36 completions for 49 attempts for 2 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook, 20 carries for 61 yards and a touchdown. Adam Thielen looking like his old self with 9 receptions, 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson with 5 receptions for 71 yards. Looking at the Vikings defense, Michael Pierce had 2 sacks. Harrison Smith, they kept on sacking Burrow. Michael Pierce with 2 sacks. Nick Virgil with a sack. Harrison Smith, Daniel Hunter. Burrow was sacked 5 times, but he was still 20 for 27 for 261 yards and 2 touchdowns. Joe Mixon, 29 carries for 127 yards and a touchdown. Jamar Chase really proved me wrong, proved all the doubters wrong, with 5 receptions, 101 yards, and a touchdown. And looking at this defense, Brandon, and with 1 second, and Evan McPherson was 2 for 2, including a game-winning field goal. I mean, there was a big upset. I thought the Vikings were gonna win it, but I was wrong, to be honest. Maybe we could see, maybe Jamar Chase could be the offensive rookie of the year with that performance, but we'll have to see. Now for our next game, the 49ers and the Lions. I thought the Lions were gonna come back, but I was proven wrong. Looking at this offense, Jimmy Garoppolo, 17 completions, 25 attempts, 314 yards and a touchdown. Trey Lance had a completion for his first throw was for 5 yards and a touchdown. Elijah Mitchell, 19 carries, 404 yards and a touchdown. Really great. Deebo Samuel had 9 receptions for 189 yards for a touchdown. And George Kittle came back with 4 receptions for 78 yards in his first game since his injury. TJ Hawkinson had 8 receptions for 97 yards and a touchdown. Still, we could go for a tight end. DeAndre Swift, he had 11 carries for 39 yards, but he also had 8 receptions for 65 yards and a touchdown. He was subbed in for Jamal Williams, who had 9 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. But their defense, Tracy Walker was the only good thing about that defense. But looking at the 49ers defense, Nick Bosa, he's still 1 sack for 3 tackles for loss. He's doing well. And Dre Greenlaw had that interception for a touchdown. Now, looking at this team, I think the 49ers, if they can still be healthy, they can still be Super Bowl contenders or playoff contenders. The Lions, they really need to pick up that defense like ASAP. Now, for our next game, the Cardinals and the Titans, like this, Kyler Murray had a game right here. Like a really great game. 21 carries for 32 yards, 22 completions for 32 attempts, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns. 2 of them was to DeAndre Hopkins, who had 6 receptions for 83 yards, and 2 of them to Christian Kirk, who had 5 receptions for 70 yards for 2 touchdowns. He also had 5 carries for 20 yards and a touchdown. Chase Edmonds had a pretty decent game, 12 carries for 63 yards. In the defense, Michael Dicker, Isaiah Simmons, Buda Baker had a really great. Isaiah Simmons had 9 tackles, Buda Baker 8 tackles. Chandler Jones with 5 sacks in a game. I repeat, 5 sacks in a game. He's still looking like his prime self at an older age. The only player who also had the sack was Michael Dugby. And Isaiah Simmons also has the interception. Now, looking at the Titans team, I think they're really regretting that Julio Jones trade. 3 receptions for 29 yards. Derrick Henry also had 17 carries for 58 yards. Not good for the #1 rushing leader. Ryan Tannehill, 21 for 35, 212 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Not really that impressive. A.J. Brown did have a touchdown, 4 receptions, 49 yards, and a touchdown. If Julio Jones keeps this up, then the Titans are really going to regret that trade. If the Cardinals keep this up, they can pretty much be playoff contenders. Now for our next game, the Seahawks versus the Colts, Russell Wilson had 18 for 23 for 4 touchdowns. with 254 yards. Chris Carson, 16 carries for 91 yards. Sorry, guys. Looking at the receiving core, DK Metcalf, 4 receptions for 60 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Lockett had 4 receptions for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Really great 2-man wide receiving core. And looking at their defense, Bobby Wagner had 13 tackles, Jordan Brooks 11 tackles, Jamal Adams 6 tackles, and looking at the Colts, Carson Wentz was 25 for 38 with 251 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor 70 carries for 56 yards and without a touchdown, which is really surprising because he was good. Because he was like a future top 10 running back based on the season he had last year. Now looking at this receiving core, Zach Pascal did have 2 touchdowns. They really had, the Colts' 2 receiving leaders this game was Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. Their wide receiving core really needs some help. And looking at the defense, DeForest Buckner was the leader. Darius Leonard only had 5 tackles. And Kari Wallace was the leading player of this team. I think that if Russell Wilson can still keep this up even after week 8, he can be definitely a NFL MVP. And the Indianapolis Colts, Carson Wentz still looking decent. Sorry guys, I was just looking at something. If he can still keep this up, he can still be like a top. He can return to his 2017 self. Now looking at our next game, the Chargers versus the Washington football team. Ryan Fitzpatrick was injured, so they had to stick with Taylor Heineke, who was 11 for 15 for 122 yards and a touchdown. Antonio Gibson, 20 carries for 90 yards. The football team receiving, Terry McLaurin, 4 receptions for 62 yards. And their defense, there's Montez Sweat has a sack, Jonathan Allen with a sack, and William Jackson III with an interception. Now looking at the Chargers passing, Justin Herbert, 31 for 47 for 337 yards, a touchdown and interception. Austin Eckler, 15 carries for 57 yards. And to go with that, Keenan Allen had 9 receptions for 100 yards. Mike Williams, 8 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. I really think the Chargers looked really good this game. It was a close one. And their defense, Joey Bosa had a sack, so that was great. So I'm pretty much thinking this. I'm still thinking that the Chargers can still keep this up. And the football team, they really took a risk with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I don't think that's going to pay off anytime soon. Our next game, the Panthers and the Jets. Zach Wilson has debuted, 20 carries for 37 yards for 258, 20 completions for 37 attempts for 258 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. He had those 2 touchdowns with Corey Davis, who caught 5 receptions for 97 yards. But that's pretty much I can see about on the Jets. Delshaw Phillips had 12 tackles in the game, but that's all I can say on the offense. And Zach Wilson had 6 sacks. I think their offensive linemen need to pick it up. Sam Darnold, he's looking like the Sam Darnold we thought would come out of UCLA. 24 completions for 35 attempts, 279 yards, and a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey, 21 carries for 98 yards. He also had 9 receptions for 89 yards, still looking like his MVP self. Robbie Anderson only had 1 reception, but that was for 57 yards and a touchdown, thrown by Darnold, his old teammate. DJ Moore, 6 receptions for 80 yards. He still looked great. Looking at his defense, Hassan Reddick, Derek Brown, Brian Burns, they're still looking like underrated players. Shaq Thompson had 10 tackles. And Thompson also had an interception. The Panthers are looking like one of the more underrated teams in the NFL, and the Jets, they're still looking like the Jets. Those offensive linemen need to be picked up real quick. They need to pick up their performance real quick. Now, for our next game, the Texans and the Jaguars, which I thought was surprising, to be honest. I mean, looking at this team, I really thought Urban Meyer needs to stay retired. I mean, he only carried the ball 16 times. James Robinson only had 5 carries. He gave the rest to Carlos Hyde, who had 44 yards with 9 carries. Looking at Trevor Lawrence, he had 51 attempts, which I don't think should be. You shouldn't pass the ball that much with a quarterback, regardless if he's a generational talent. Yeah, 332 yards for 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I mean, he did throw a touchdown to DJ Chark, Marvin Jones. He had 3 receptions for 86 yards. The other had 5 receptions for 77 yards. Laviska Shenault also had 7 carries for 50 yards, 7 receptions for 50 yards. And their defense, Josh Allen, I mean, he's the only bright spot on the team. Looking at the Texans, Tyrod Taylor is still looking like his Buffalo Bills self. 21 completions for 33 attempts, 291 yards for 2 touchdowns. Mark Ingram looked like he's still in his prime. 26 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. Philip Lindsay, 8 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Cooks, 5 receptions for 132 yards and And look at the 3 people got interceptions: Justin Reed, Vernon Hargraves, Christian Kirksey. I mean, I think this could potentially be the only thing the Texans win. And the Jaguars, they're still the Jaguars, unfortunately. Our next game, the Chiefs versus the Browns. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is still look like the top quarterback in the league. 27 completions, 36 attempts, 337 yards for 3 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill looked like the best wide receiver in the league. 11 receptions, 197 yards, and a touchdown. Travis Kelce, still the top tight end in the league. 6 receptions, 76 yards for 2 touchdowns. Look at his defense, Chris Jones, 2 sacks. He did really great this season. And look at the Cleveland, Baker Mayfield with 20 completions, 28 for 321 yards and interception. Nick Chubb, 15 carries for 83 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt, 6 carries for 33 yards and a touchdown. Looking at this receiving core, I mean, David Njoku, 3 receptions for 76 yards. Jarvis Landry, 5 receptions for 71 yards. Looking at their defense, Myles Garrett has a sack in the game. That's great. And looking at our pass, I really think this is a really close game. I mean, looking at this, I mean, the Chiefs could use some improvements a lot. And if Browns, I mean, those two teams can be like still great. Just, I think this was a good game in the overall. Now looking at our next game, the Dolphins versus Patriots. Mac Jones looked like the clear quarterback situation over Cam Newton. 29 completions for 39 attempts, 281 yards and a touchdown. He did pretty well. That touchdown came against Nelson Aguilar, who had 5 receptions for 72 yards. Damian Harris has 23 carries for 100 yards. New tight ends, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, 5 receptions, 42 yards, 3 receptions at 31 yards. Looking at our defense, Kyle Van Noy had a sack, and Jonathan Jones had an interception. Looking at the Dolphins offense, Tua Tagovailoa had a decent game, 16 completions for 27 attempts, 202 yards and a touchdown. One of those games to Jalen Waddle, who had a great game this game. 4 receptions, 61 yards and a touchdown. He did great. Devontae Parker, 4 receptions, 81 yards. Now look at our defense. Jerome Baker had 12 tackles. That's really great for him. And the only person who got a sack, I really can't see it, to be honest. I mean, looking at this, the Patriots, I mean, they still had like a decent defensive performance. They only gave up 17 points. While the Dolphins, I mean, they still look like one of the more underrated teams in the NFL, so we'll have to see. Now, the Packers and the Saints is our next team. Now, I'm seeing this like, I think Aaron Rodgers is already regretting his off-season shenanigans. 15 for 28 for 133 yards and 2 interceptions. Aaron Jones only had 5 carries for 9 yards. Like, the team only had 15 carries for 43 yards. I mean, Devontae Adams had 5 receptions for 56 yards, but not a single other wide receiver got over 35 yards in that game. Now for New Orleans, Jameis Winston is someone that actually proved me wrong. 14 for 20, 148 yards and 5 touchdowns in the game. Alvin Kamara, 20 carries for 83 yards. He also had 3 receptions for 8 yards. Deontay Harris, 2 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown. Jawan Johnson, 3 receptions for 21 yards and 2 touchdowns. Looking at their defense, Marcus Davenport got a sack, and Marcus Williams and Paulson Adebo had interceptions. I mean, the Saints, I thought they might fall off because they lost a lot of their starters, but proving this, I think they can still be like a top contenders in the team. And the Packers, I don't know, this could be their fall off season this year. Well, I don't know. Now, looking at the Giants. Giants and Broncos, Teddy Bridgewater looked like an upgrade over Drew Lock. 28 completions for 36 attempts for 2 touchdowns. Melvin Gordon looked like his old self in Los Angeles. 11 carries for 101 yards and touchdown. Tim Patrick had the receiving touchdowns. Jerry Jeudy had 6 receptions for 72 yards, but he got out with an injury. Noah Fant also looked like a top tight end in the league. And looking at their defense, Von Miller had 2 sacks, which is great for him. Now looking at the Giants, Daniel Jones had a good game, 22 completions for 37 yards and touchdowns. Saquon Barkley, he's still looking musty after the injury, 10 carries for 26 yards. Sterling Shepard, 7 receptions for 113 yards and a touchdown. He looked really great. Kenny Galladay and Darius Slayton, they also had great games. Logan Ryan also had 10 tackles. Blake Martinez looked well. The Giants, I really don't blame them. They went up against one of the better defenses in the league. I think they still have a chance to succeed in this league. The Broncos, if they can keep this up, Teddy Bridgewater might end up as a top 10 QB, and they might be able to make the playoffs, to sneak into the playoffs. Now for a Sunday night primetime game, the Bears and Rams, Matthew Stafford proved he looked like how he would look like if he had weapons. 20 for 26, 321 yards and 3 touchdowns. 7 receptions, 180 yards to Cooper Kupp, who had 1 of those touchdowns. Van Jefferson's 2 receptions for 80 yards and a touchdown. Robert Woods, 3 receptions, 27 yards and a touchdown. He looked like an MVP, like how he's supposed to look like in Detroit. Andy Dalton didn't have a good game, 27 completion, 38 yards, 206, and an interception. Justin Fields had to look better. They should have started him. They were facing against Donald. Darrell Henderson had 16 carries for 70 yards. Aaron Donald still looked like the MVP. a sack and a tackle for loss. David Long also had an interception. Ramsey still looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's the highest receiver yards with 45 by Marquise Goodwin. Justin Fields also had a rushing touchdown. And Roquan Smith also had 11 tackles in that game. Looking at this team, I really think the Rams still are Super Bowl contenders after the signing of Matthew Stafford. And the Bears, I think they can be like, I think they're only going to be in like primetime games just to fill out the primetime games online. Now for our final game, the Ravens and the Raiders. Lamar Jackson had a great game, 19 completions for 30 attempts, 235 yards and touchdowns, 12 carries for 86 yards. Derek Carr looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, 34 completions for 56 attempts, 435 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Sammy Watkins still looked like his Week 1 self. Marquise Brown had 6 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown with 6 targets. He looked like he had a breakout game that season. Darren Waller looked like the one of the best tight ends in the league. 10 receptions and 105 yards and a touchdown. Odofe Away also has first sack. Bernell McPhee also has sack. Patrick Queen, 9 tackles and a sack. Looking at the Raiders defense, Max Crosby had 2 sacks. which was really great. I mean, he's one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the league. I mean, I'm not going to panic over this first loss. I mean, I think that could be our only trap game in the game. I mean, I'm still confident in this team. I mean, the Raiders, they look like they can be one of the more underrated teams in the league. While the Ravens, I still have confidence in them. I think they just need to shake out that game, and we can still be able to make the playoffs. Alright guys, that was the end of the video. If you like that video, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Also, make sure you follow my Instagram and Twitter down in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.